Welcome, mystery lovers. In this story, we step into the world of Tommy and Tuppence, a pair whose wit and courage have made them unforgettable. Tell us where in the world you're listening from. It's always a joy to see how far these mysteries travel. If you enjoy these mysteries, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support helps keep new cases coming. Now then, shall we begin? The night sky over London was the colour of wet slate, and the lamps lining Grosvenor Square cast amber pools upon slick pavements where the mist clung close. The townhouse of Lady Aurelia Montfort loomed above it all, every window blazing with golden light. From within came the hum of a string quartet, muffled by velvet drapes, and the faint laughter of guests already lulled into a sense of holiday abandon. It was the night of the annual midnight masquerade, a gathering whispered about as much for its opulence as for the secrets it seemed always to coax out from behind its gilded doors. Tommy Beresford adjusted the tilt of his domino mask, squinting up at the carved stone facade. Well, Tuppence, I must say, Lady Aurelia hasn't let rationing affect her electric bill. That's enough candle power to light half of Westminster. Beside him, Tuppence smoothed a hand down the sapphire folds of her gown, her mask a delicate fan of peacock feathers. Don't be provincial, Tommy. If one is to throw a masquerade, one must make certain London knows it from the pavement upward. Besides, her eyes glittered through the feathers, you're forgetting we were promised something rather more diverting than champagne and waltzes. Secrets, remember? He gave a resigned chuckle. Yes, an old comrade from the service days whispers of urgent matters, and here we are, done up like extras from an operetta. Still, I dare say there are worse fates. They climbed the steps and were met by a butler, whose white-gloved hands relieved them of cloaks. Music swelled as the doors swung inward, and instantly they were engulfed by a tide of satin, velvet, and jewels. 100 masks gleamed beneath chandeliers, jesters and harlequins, queens and cavaliers, even one pharaoh complete with golden crook and flail. The air was thick with perfume, candle wax, and that special note of expectancy peculiar to evenings where identities are half hidden and reputations may tremble. Tuppence drew in the scene with relish. Look at them, Tommy. Every mask concealing a tale. Do you feel it? Something tense beneath the gaiety. Tommy's response was practical. I feel a need for a drink. Come along. They threaded their way toward the ballroom, pausing as acquaintances hailed them in voices muffled behind brocade disguises. Though the orchestra played sprightly airs, a subtle undercurrent pressed upon the gathering. Snatches of whispered conversation carried in the intervals, debts discussed, liaisons hinted, grudges resurrected. Tuppence caught more than one pair of eyes darting away when hers lingered too long. By the marble stairwell she halted suddenly. A figure stood apart from the swirl, robed in shimmering silver from head to foot, even the mask a blank plate that reflected the chandelier's light. Still as a statue, the figure seemed less guest than apparition. Now that, murmured Tuppence, is interesting. Probably some cousin of the hostess hoping to outshine the decor, Tommy said lightly, but he followed her gaze with a faint frown. The silver guest made no move, offered no word, only watched the crowd with the patience of a hunter. When Tuppence turned back, the figure had vanished, melting into the throng without a sound. Midnight neared. The great clock in the hall chimed the quarter, then the half. Masks grew more rakish, voices louder, laughter a shade too sharp. Lady Aurelia herself, a vision in crimson and jet, lifted her hand for silence. My friends, as tradition demands, at the stroke of 12 we shall unmask. Until then, dance, drink, and be merry, for who knows what shadows linger behind each disguise. The orchestra struck a flourish. Couples whirled across the parquet floor, skirts brushing in arcs of colour. Tuppence allowed herself to be drawn into a reel by a masked cavalier, though her eyes sought always the corners of the room, alert. Tommy, leaning against a pillar with glass in hand, watched her amusement with his usual mixture of pride and wariness. Then, just as the minute hand approached 12, a sound knifed through the music. A scream, shrill, tearing, unmistakable. The violinist faltered, the cello's bow screeched, and silence clamped down upon the room. Guests froze mid-step, masks turned in unison toward the balcony that overlooked the garden. There, beneath the blaze of crystal chandeliers, a man had fallen against the railing. His jeweled mask tilted askew, his hand clawing at the air before he collapsed in a sprawl upon the polished floor. For one suspended heartbeat, no one moved. The orchestra's final note shivered into nothingness. Then came a rush of voices, the scrape of chairs, the frantic shuffle of satin shoes. Tuppence was first to reach him, Tommy close behind. The mask slipped from the man's face, glittering as it spun across the floor. Sir Reginald Drake, financier, patron of half the city's entertainments, lay pale and motionless, his eyes staring glassily at the chandeliers above. "Heavens," whispered Tuppence, pressing 2 fingers to his throat. She looked up sharply. "He's gone." Gasps rippled through the assembly. Lady Aurelia pressed a hand to her lips, bracelets jangling. "Not Sir Reginald. Here, tonight." Her voice broke. Servants rushed forward, uncertain, while guests shrank back as though death itself were contagious. Tommy crouched beside his wife, scanning the floor. The goblet lay overturned, dark liquid staining the parquet. He sniffed, then grimaced. Something unpleasant, not merely wine. Around them murmurs grew, speculation mounting. Some women clutched their masks tighter, others let them fall forgotten. A man in a fox costume muttered, "Poison, surely. I told you, he had enemies enough." The clock struck midnight, each chime reverberating like a knell. 12 times it sounded, solemn and inexorable. And when the last echo faded, the masquerade was no longer a festival of laughter, but a stage set for murder. Tuppence rose slowly, eyes narrowing as she surveyed the gathered throng. Beneath silk and feathers, every face seemed suddenly sinister. Every whisper coiled like a threat. And somewhere in the shifting crowd, she knew, a killer still wore their mask. The hush that followed Sir Reginald's collapse was unnatural, as though even the candles flickered in disbelief. Beyond the long windows, fog pressed close, muffling the sounds of London. Within, all was strained silence until Lady Aurelia Montfort found her voice. "Please, everyone, remain calm," she cried, her crimson gown catching the light like spilled wine. "There will be an explanation." Her command was brittle, more plea than order. It did little to soothe the guests, who pressed back from the sprawled body as if distance might save them from implication. Tommy, ever the soldier, stepped forward with brisk authority. "Best if we have some order here. Ladies, gentlemen, no one touch the goblet or the body until it's been examined." He turned to a footman. "Shut those doors, will you? No one leaves this room until the police arrive." The young servant hesitated, then obeyed. Heavy oak doors boomed shut, the click of the lock reverberating across marble and silk. Tuppence knelt gracefully beside the fallen man. Sir Reginald's eyes were glassy, his lips faintly discoloured. She regarded the overturned goblet, the dark stain that seeped across the parquet. "Poison," she murmured under her breath. "Poison?" whispered a masked guest, a man dressed as a cavalier. "How can you be certain?" Tuppence looked up, her feathered mask tilting. "Because a healthy man does not crumple in an instant without cause, and because I saw no blade or blow." A collective shiver passed among the guests. In that gilded ballroom, festooned with orchids and lit by chandeliers, danger suddenly seemed closer than the polished silver or the laughter that had rung minutes before. Lady Aurelia clutched her pearls, her hands trembling despite her attempt at composure. "Sir Reginald? Dead? Oh, merciful heavens!" Yet her eyes, Tuppence noted with quiet sharpness, did not brim with tears. "Who was nearest to him?" Tommy asked crisply. "Who passed him his drink?" The circle tightened, every mask a potential lie. A young man in sober evening wear, his domino mask slipping crooked on his nose, stepped forward. His hands shook visibly. I'm Henry Latham, Sir Reginald's secretary. I brought him his goblet. It was on the silver tray with the others." "And did you pour it?" Tommy asked. No, I only carried it. He bade me fetch it as he spoke with Lady Eleanor." Henry's voice cracked. "I swear I touched nothing else." Eyes turned instinctively toward Lady Eleanor Drake. Draped in ivory silk, her beauty was statuesque, yet her expression remained cool, detached. Too detached, Tuppence thought, as she regarded her husband's corpse. "My husband," Lady Eleanor said evenly, "was accustomed to wine before supper. He demanded it as his right. If Henry brought it, then Henry merely obeyed." Her words absolved and accused in the same breath. Henry paled, stammering, I would never—" "Enough," Tommy cut in firmly. "We can't leap to accusations." He turned to Lady Aurelia. "Have you sent for Scotland Yard?" "I have," she said, voice taut. "But until they arrive, I beg you all remain where you are. The name of my house shall not be darkened by wild flight and scandal. We owe Sir Reginald that much." Yet beneath her words ran another current, fear for her reputation. Guests shifted uneasily, as though masks had grown heavier. Some whispered together, voices hushed. One man, broad-shouldered, his mask gilded like a Roman emperor, paced with restless energy. Tuppence recognised him from reports. Edmund Rawdon, industrial magnate, known rival to Sir Reginald. His eyes darted, calculating. "Convenient," he muttered, loud enough for several to hear. The great Drake silenced at last. He knew too much of other men's dealings. "Careful, Rawdon," warned a woman in emerald silk. "Your relish is showing." "Better relish than hypocrisy," Rawdon shot back. "Half of you here had cause to wish him gone. Shall we all pretend shock?" The words broke the uneasy stillness, and suddenly accusations sparked like flint. A murmur rose, motives whispered, debts invoked, rivalries named. Tuppence let the swell of voices wash over her, watching each reaction. Lady Eleanor's unflinching calm, Henry's trembling hands, Rawdon's brazen defiance. A woman in lace fanned herself furiously, though the room was cool. Another guest tugged nervously at gloves as if to hide some telltale mark. Tommy moved among them with military firmness. "Everyone sit. We wait for the yard. Until then, no one leaves. No one removes their masks unless asked." Lady Aurelia gestured to her servants. Chairs were arranged hastily, guests lowering themselves with the stiffness of suspects rather than partygoers. The string quartet had long ceased playing, their instruments lay abandoned, and the silence seemed to grow louder by the minute. Tuppence crossed to Tommy, her voice low. "Did you see Eleanor's expression? She looks as though she's watching a play, not her husband's death." "Yes," Tommy muttered, "and our friend Rawdon couldn't be more obvious if he waved a banner. Still, I'd bet my last shilling the guilty party won't reveal themselves so easily." A servant slipped into the room, whispered to Lady Aurelia, then departed again. "The yard is on its way," Aurelia announced. "But until then the truth may be found among those closest to him. A dozen of you were within arm's reach when he drank. 12 masks and 1 murderer." The words struck like a gavel. Every head turned, every gaze sharpened. Tuppence glanced at the silver goblet, the dark stain glistening like spilled ink. 12 masks, she thought, 12 possible hands that could have delivered death so swiftly. Behind each disguise, ambition, jealousy, desperation, which was powerful enough to kill. As the grandfather clock tolled the 12:15, the masquerade's gaiety was gone forever. In its place hung the oppressive certainty that within that locked room of velvet and crystal, danger sat still among them. The echo of carriage wheels in the square outside was the only sound, until the sharp rap of knuckles struck the double doors. A ripple of relief and apprehension ran through the assembled guests. At Lady Aurelia's nod, the butler opened them, admitting a draught of night air along with a tall man in a rain-darkened overcoat. His hat brim dripped from the fog, and his grey eyes missed nothing as they swept the glittering company. Inspector Jonathan Marston of Scotland Yard wasted neither time nor courtesy. He removed his hat, shook off the damp, and addressed the room in a voice as brisk as sleet. "I am told Sir Reginald Drake lies dead. Poison suspected. No one leaves until this matter is settled. Understand?" Masks inclined, silk rustled, but no one spoke. Marston strode to the body, kneeling with professional detachment. He examined the goblet, sniffed it, and gave a grunt of satisfaction. As suspected. Bitter almonds, cyanide most likely. He looked up sharply. "Who poured this?" The secretary, Henry Latham, lifted his hand tremulously. "I carried the glass, Inspector, but I swear I poured nothing. It came from the tray." "Then where," Marston demanded, "is this tray?" A hush fell. The servants glanced among themselves. One footman stepped forward, voice low. "It was here, sir. After the scream, after the body fell, it was gone. We thought perhaps another guest. You thought nothing, Marston cut him off. You acted like amateurs at a children's play. He rose. The tray is missing, the vessel tainted, and every one of you still hides behind your masks like stage villains. Very well, we begin. He gestured toward a cluster of chairs. Sit. Each of you will be questioned in turn. A constable returned with the serving tray, recovered from the butler's pantry, wiped but still damp around the rims. Lady Aurelia bristled. Inspector, these are my guests, people of standing. Must we endure interrogation in this theatrical manner? Yes, madam, Marston said curtly, unless you wish your drawing room to become a mortuary annex for the yard. The hostess paled, lips tight. She yielded, and the guests obeyed. Tommy and Tuppence, standing a little apart, exchanged a glance. Brusque fellow, Tommy muttered. Tuppence smiled faintly. Brusque, yes, but not blind. Watch how they squirm. And squirm they did. The first to be called forward was Edmund Rawdon, the industrialist, his gilded mask tilted like a conqueror's helm. He leaned back in the chair, chin raised. Your quarrels with Sir Reginald are well known, Marston said. My quarrels were public, not clandestine, Rawdon retorted. If I wished him dead, I wouldn't choose Lady Aurelia's ballroom as the stage. Poisoning is the weapon of cowards. Yet convenient, if the aim is profit, Marston countered. Rawdon's eyes flashed, but he said nothing further. Next came Lady Eleanor Drake. She glided to the chair, ivory gown trailing, her mask now discarded to reveal an expression as composed as marble. My husband's death grieves me deeply, she said with perfect poise. Marston's gaze was sceptical. Your grief is remarkably tidy. Where were you when he drank? Beside him, she admitted, but my hands were empty. Henry brought the glass. Henry shivered under the weight of her words. So it went. Each guest called, each offering fragments of truth and clouds of denial. One woman's perfume had spilled across the cloakroom floor. She claimed it was clumsiness, but Marston's brow darkened. A young man stammered when asked about a quarrel overheard near the library. He insisted it was mere debate, yet his flushed face suggested otherwise. The masks lent the scene a grotesque air. Some clung to them stubbornly, preferring anonymity. Others removed them with irritation, only to reveal faces taut with fear. Half hidden, half revealed, the gathering resembled a troupe of reluctant actors caught between roles. Tuppence, meanwhile, drifted like a dancer through the pauses. While Marston thundered, she listened, truly listened. She heard the hiss of silk as a woman clenched her fists, the catch of breath when Henry's name arose, the nervous tap of a boot heel that grew louder with every question. Her sharp eyes caught more, a gentleman's sleeve faintly smudged as though brushed against damp paint, a lady's feather headdress with strands missing, torn not by accident but by a sudden hand. She bent near Tommy. Notice the pheasant feathers, she whispered. He frowned. Shorter than the others, yes. What of it? Freshly torn, Tuppence murmured, and no one tears plumage in polite dancing without leaving a scratch or two. Tommy's mouth curved in a thin smile. You'd have made a marvellous sergeant major. Marston was not blind to their low conversation. He turned on them sharply. And who are you two, whispering like conspirators? Tommy straightened. Thomas Beresford. This is my wife, Prudence. An old service friend warned us. Lady Aurelia asked us to keep an eye on things this evening, though it seems we've stumbled into something rather livelier than expected. Then you'll keep your observations to yourselves, Marston snapped. But Tuppence's smile was unfazed. We always do, Inspector, until they prove useful. A snort of derision, yet he returned to his questioning. Hours seemed to pass in the stifled air of the ballroom. The fire in the grate had dwindled to embers. Candles guttered low. Servants fetched coffee, though few guests drank. The masks now hung limp in hands or dangled from ribbons. Glamour had drained away, leaving raw nerves. At last Marston paced the length of the room. We have a missing tray, a poisoned goblet, quarrels overheard, perfume suspiciously spilled, feathers torn. None of you admit knowledge, but mark me, the yard will tear through alibis like tissue. The guilty among you should pray for leniency before morning. His words cracked like a whip. Tuppence leaned toward Tommy once more. He blusters, but beneath it he's sharp. Still, his net is too wide. Everyone looks guilty, which means the true one hides in plain sight. Tommy nodded grimly. And until the tray is found, it's all smoke and mirrors. Not entirely, she replied. Her eyes slid once more to the lady with the ruined feathers. Sometimes smoke clings to a single garment. We'll see. The hour was near 2 when Marston at last permitted guests to shift from their rigid circle. The body of Sir Reginald had been carried discreetly to a side chamber, but its absence only deepened the unease. Lady Aurelia rose, pale but resolute. Inspector, my guests cannot endure this strain much longer. Must we remain confined? Yes, Marston said simply, until the yard completes its work. His words tolled like another death knell, and so the masquerade dragged on into uneasy vigil. Behind the glitter and grandeur, whispers thickened, alibis hardened, secrets pressed closer. Tuppence watched them all, her mind already tracing lines between tray, perfume, quarrel, and feathers. Somewhere within this company of masks lay the hand that had guided death to Sir Reginald's lips. The trick was to tug gently at the threads until the fabric unravelled. She smiled faintly to herself. Midnight had passed, but the true performance was only beginning. The ballroom had settled into a strained vigil, the music stilled, laughter smothered. It was no longer a masquerade, but a holding chamber of suspicion, where jewels glittered uneasily, and whispers carried like draughts under a door. Scotland Yard's Inspector Marston prowled with brusque authority, but his presence only stiffened spines and sharpened tongues. If the truth was to be coaxed out, it would not be through interrogation alone. Prone to gestures grand enough to sweep entire theatres into her orbit. Now, in Lady Aurelia's ballroom, her performance burned bright, every word a dagger, every gesture dripping with drama. Inspector Marston wasted no time. You admit to introducing poison into his wine. Yes, she cried. I carried the vial in my reticule. I waited until the tray was set down, and then I tipped it in, unseen. The guests erupted into frightened whispers. Some leaned back as though her admission might poison the very air. Others leaned forward, hungry for scandal's climax. Tuppence, however, watched in stillness. Her eyes narrowed. There was a quality in Clara's tone, too rehearsed, too precise. This was not the raw tremor of guilt, but the practiced projection of an actress holding the stage. Marston pressed harder. Where is the vial? Clara faltered, then lifted her chin. I discarded it. Where? In the garden. I flung it into the darkness. Convenient, thought Tommy, his lips thinning. And what manner of poison was it? Marston demanded. Arsenic, she declared without hesitation. A murmur ran through the room, yet Tuppence's brows rose, for she remembered Marston's earlier words. Bitter almonds, cyanide most likely. Clara's script was already straying from fact. The inspector, too, caught the discrepancy. Arsenic, you say? Yet my examination of the goblet suggested cyanide. Clara's face flushed, but she pressed on, louder, fiercer. Call it what you will. I killed him. I alone am guilty. Her words rang, but the notes were hollow. Tuppence leaned toward Tommy, whispering, She's acting. It is not a confession. It's a performance. Tommy nodded grimly. And every performance has its motive. Marston was not blind. His eyes narrowed, his voice cut like steel. Miss Vale, your tale has gaps wide enough for an omnibus. Produce proof or stand condemned as a liar. Clara swayed, one hand to her brow, her breath quickened. For a moment it seemed she might collapse, but then her eyes blazed and her mask slipped free, revealing a face more desperate than proud. I did not kill him, she confessed at last, her voice dropping to a ragged whisper. But I wished him dead. He destroyed me. He promised love, protection, a future. Instead, her voice broke. Instead, he bled me dry. He blackmailed me. The words fell like stones. The room went still. Blackmailed, Marston echoed. Yes, she said, trembling now, her hands twisting the silk of her gown. He held letters I wrote in foolishness, in passion. He threatened to expose me, to ruin me unless I paid. My savings, my jewels, piece by piece, I gave them to him. Still he demanded more. When I resisted, he laughed, said I would crawl to him in the end. Her voice shook with genuine anguish now, not stagecraft. I thought I thought tonight I might frighten him, that I might confess before you all to break his hold. But I swear, I did not touch his glass." A silence followed, heavy, sickened. The grandeur of Sir Reginald's reputation, already dimmed, crumbled further. An image formed of a man not merely financier and host, but blackmailer, manipulator, a spider at the centre of many webs. Lady Aurelia stirred, her face pale with distaste. "If this is true, if Reginald stooped to such vulgar cruelty—" "It is true," Clara insisted, "and I was not alone. Others here too bore his sting. Look among us, Inspector, you will find more victims than friends." Eyes darted nervously. Lady Eleanor's lips pressed thin, Rawdon's fists clenched. Mrs. Denham shifted in her chair with sudden colour. Sir Reginald's shadow lengthened, darker than death itself. Tuppence stepped forward, her voice calm amid the tumult. "Miss Vale, you say you intended only to frighten him, to confess so that his power over you would wither. Why confess to murder, then?" Clara's eyes filled with tears. Because I feared. When he fell, when I saw him dead, I thought, they will discover my letters, they will know my dealings, and I will be ruined regardless. Better to take blame upon myself, to appear avenger rather than victim." Tuppence studied her, weighing truth. The sobs now seemed real, the shoulders slumped not with melodrama, but with years of humiliation. Clara was guilty of foolishness, perhaps of theatrics, but not of poisoning. Tommy leaned close. So, his list of enemies lengthens. Blackmail, deceit, broken promises. It's a wonder he lived as long as he did. Tuppence murmured, "Yes, and the real culprit will be among those less flamboyant, the quiet ones, the ones who watch while others burn." Her gaze swept the room, not Rawdon, loud and brash, not Clara, overwrought, but perhaps the still faces, Lady Eleanor, poised and perfect, Henry the secretary, pale and silent, Mrs. Denham, rigid and evasive. Murder often wore a quieter mask. Inspector Marston slammed his hand against the mantel. "Enough of these diversions. We have one dead, one false confession, and a room full of liars. Hear me well. No one leaves this house until I have the truth. Miss Vale, you may sit. You have wasted our time enough. But know this. Your letters will be seized, your dealings examined. If they confirm your tale, they will damn Sir Reginald's memory as surely as the poison did his body." Clara collapsed into her chair, sobbing, her feathers wilting around her like fallen wings. The others sat in stiff silence, the echo of her false confession still humming in the air. Tuppence folded her arms, eyes narrowing. The performance had served its purpose, not to prove guilt, but to shift the spotlight. Sir Reginald was no longer martyr but monster. The list of suspects was no longer narrowed but expanded, and somewhere among those silent, watchful faces, the true murderer waited patiently for suspicion to burn itself out. The fog outside Lady Aurelia's townhouse pressed thick against the windows, a shifting wall of grey that seemed determined to keep the guests sealed inside with their secrets. The candles had burned low, their wax pooled in silver holders. The air in the ballroom was close, scented with smoke and unease. Inspector Marston had just rounded on Rawdon for the third time when a cry came from the garden. A constable posted on the terrace shouted, his voice cutting through the fog, "There! Someone's out there! Running!" Every head snapped toward the tall windows. Shapes loomed beyond the mist, one darker than the rest, moving swiftly across the frost-rimmed lawn. Marston barked an order, and two constables, summoned earlier from the yard and only just arrived, sprang into pursuit. Chairs scraped, voices clamoured, masks were clutched tighter. "Who is it?" Lady Aurelia demanded, rising in agitation. But Tommy and Tuppence already knew. The silver gleam in the fog, the flash of metallic cloth, unmistakable. "The phantom guest," Tuppence breathed. Moments later, the constables dragged him in. His cloak was muddied and torn, his face was bare. He struggled, cursing under his breath, until Marston himself ripped the mask free. Marston held up the silver mask Tommy had found in the library. "You left this behind." The face revealed was lean, handsome in a way soured by bitterness, the eyes restless, defensive. A collective gasp swept the room. "Godfrey Drake," Lady Aurelia whispered. "Yes," Marston said grimly. Sir Reginald's nephew. The young man shook off the constable's grip with a snarl. "I've done nothing wrong." "You fled into the garden," Marston shot back. "Why run, if innocent?" "Because this whole circus stinks," Godfrey spat. "My uncle dead, the rest of you whispering like jackals, and I, already branded villain before the night ends." His voice rang with fury, but underneath was a note of something more brittle. Fear. Tuppence tilted her head. "You came masked in silver. Why hide your identity from the start?" He gave a harsh laugh. "Would you have welcomed me, Lady Aurelia, had you known my name? My uncle cut me off years ago, said I was a wastrel, unfit for the family fortune. I came tonight not as guest, but claimant. I meant to demand what was mine." The crowd murmured, scandalized. Lady Eleanor's lips curved in disdain. "How like you, Godfrey, to arrive uninvited and expect inheritance at a masquerade?" His eyes glittered with hatred. "Better a beggar than a thief in pearls." She stiffened, colour rising. Inspector Marston interposed. "You admit skulking about the house." "I admit nothing skulking," Godfrey retorted. "I spoke with him earlier in private. Demanded repayment of money he withheld. He refused. We quarrelled. But when I left him, he was alive. That's all." Marston's gaze was hard. "Alive, then, dead minutes later. Convenient." Godfrey drew himself up. "Think what you like, I did not poison him." Yet suspicion thickened. Tommy studied the man carefully. His bitterness was genuine, but bitterness was motive enough. Tuppence stepped closer. "And what of this?" she asked quietly, sliding a hand into the pocket of his cloak. She drew forth a folded envelope, smudged and creased. Godfrey started. It's nothing." But Tuppence opened it. The handwriting was sharp, the words damning. "If Reginald falls, you shall rise. Stand ready. The fortune must be yours." Gasps echoed. Rawdon leapt to his feet. It's forged. I never wrote such a letter." All eyes swiveled toward him. The rival industrialist, broad-shouldered and brash, flushed crimson. Marston seized the note. "It bears your hand, Rawdon. Even the initials, E.R. Will you deny it?" "I will," Rawdon thundered. "It's trickery. That viper of a nephew plants evidence to shift blame." Godfrey sneered. "Convenient, isn't it? My uncle's fiercest rival, poised to inherit contracts worth millions the moment Reginald was out of the way. Who had greater reason?" Half the room murmured assent. The other half eyed Godfrey warily. Lady Aurelia pressed a hand to her temples. "This is intolerable. Are we to watch you brawl like dock workers in my ballroom?" But the rift had opened. Some sided with Godfrey, believing his rage genuine, his letter evidence of Rawdon's guilt. Others hissed that the nephew was too quick, too cunning, planting blame to hide his own hand. Inspector Marston tried to seize control. "Silence!" His command cracked the air. "We shall examine this properly." But already the damage was done. Suspicion split the company clean in two. Loyalty divided, tension coiled like a spring. Tommy took Tuppence aside, their voices low amidst the murmurs. "Well," he said grimly, "if this isn't a neat division, two culprits, each damning the other, and half the room prepared to believe both." Tuppence's brow furrowed. Godfrey's bitterness is no act, yet his movements are too shadowed, his presence too elusive, and the letter, why carry it so openly in his pocket, as if meant to be found? "Which suggests planting," Tommy said. "Indeed," she mused. "And Rawdon, boisterous, angry, but perhaps too blunt for so sly a murder. Poison demands patience, not bluster." They shared a glance. Neither fit perfectly, yet both hovered close. Inspector Marston pressed Godfrey again. "Explain why you fled through the garden." Godfrey's jaw worked. "Because I heard them whispering, that I poisoned him, that the yard would clap me in irons before dawn. I knew I'd stand no chance if I stayed." Marston eyed him coldly. "And the mask? Why disguise yourself at all?" "Because I had no invitation," Godfrey snapped. "Because I knew Lady Aurelia would never open her doors to me otherwise. I wanted only to speak to him, to force his hand, not to kill." His words rang with defiance, yet unease lingered. Lady Eleanor spoke then, her tone like ice. "My husband despised you, Godfrey. You leached from him for years. Now you dare appear as though wronged." His eyes narrowed. "Despised me, yes, but he robbed me as surely as he robbed others. He kept money that was mine by blood, and if he threatened to expose fraud, as you say, perhaps he feared his own dealings most of all." The company gasped at his audacity. Tuppence studied them all. Godfrey defiant, Rawdon furious, Eleanor cold, Aurelia trembling. The room was a kaleidoscope of guilt, each face fractured by fear. She spoke softly to Tommy. "Notice how the true killer stays silent while others shout. That is often the way." Tommy gave a wry smile. "And which of this circus do you suspect of silence?" "Perhaps the one who has most to gain by waiting until suspicion devours the rest," she replied. Marston at last declared, "Both men, Godfrey Drake and Edmund Rawdon, are under equal suspicion. Until handwriting is tested, until alibis are checked, neither may leave. We shall settle this by morning." But the division had set. Guests clustered, some behind the nephew, some behind the rival. Accusations hissed in corners, alliances formed, the masquerade unravelled into factions. Lady Aurelia wrung her hands, despairing. "My house will be remembered not for splendour but scandal." Tuppence laid a hand lightly upon her arm. "Courage, Lady Aurelia. Truth has a way of emerging even from the thickest fog." As dawn's first greyness seeped through stained glass, the company still seethed. Godfrey sat glowering, Rawdon pacing like a caged beast, Eleanor remote as marble, Clara Vale huddled in despair. The masks, discarded, lay scattered across the floor, a silent graveyard of deception, and on the table the silver mask gleamed in the wan light, a reminder of how close death walked that night in silken velvet. The masquerade was no longer a ball, it was a battlefield, and before long the spring of tension would snap. The masquerade had become less a ball than a crucible. Masks lay abandoned on gilded chairs, jewels sat heavy on tired throats, and each guest wore not costume but suspicion. The chandeliers above still gleamed, but their brilliance seemed harsh now, exposing cracks in every face. Tommy and Tuppence, moving deliberately through the room, began the slow, patient work of unravelling motives. If Inspector Marston relied on blunt interrogation, they used a subtler dance, coaxing truths from lips that barely dared to part. Near the long table of abandoned champagne flutes, Mrs. Denham stood stiffly, her angular figure shadowed against the draped curtains. Tuppence approached with a sympathetic air. "A dreadful ordeal, is it not?" she said gently. Mrs. Denham's mouth pinched. "More dreadful for some than others. My husband's reputation, our livelihood, may yet be dragged into this. Reginald Drake was not the noble figure society imagined." "You mean the fraudulent scheme?" Tuppence prompted. The woman hesitated, then spoke in a rush. "He held papers, proof that could have ruined us. Debts, dealings. He threatened to expose them unless my husband bowed to his will. Jealousy, financial ruin. It was his game. If you want a motive, Mrs. Beresford, half this room has one." Her bitterness was real, but Tuppence noted carefully, bitterness could wound, but it could also shield. Meanwhile, Tommy cornered Rawdon, who was still prowling like a caged beast, his gold-trimmed mask discarded in disgust. "You gained from his fall," Tommy said bluntly. "The contracts, the deals, millions, I'm told." Rawdon's lip curled. "Yes, and you'll say that makes me guilty. But mark this, Beresford. I fight my battles openly. I don't creep with poison like a craven. Reginald and I clashed, yes, but he was a snake to the end. Ask the actress, ask the widow. He kept many entangled in his coils." Tommy tilted his head. "So your motive is gain, and your defence is pride?" Rawdon glared. "Call it what you will. I'd sooner strike a man with my fist than with a bottle of cyanide." Tommy filed it away. A red herring, perhaps, but sometimes pride concealed desperation. The night stretched and stories piled high. Jealousies whispered of secret affairs, Reginald's attentions not always confined to his wife. A lady in emerald silk muttered that she had seen him slipping notes to another's hand. A gentleman confessed that Reginald had dangled investment promises, then snatched them away, leaving bankruptcy in his wake. Each tale was a fresh layer, painting Reginald less victim than villain. Yet beneath the swell of grievances lay one question still unanswered. Who had acted upon their hatred? It was Tuppence who found the clue. She wandered to the balcony where Sir Reginald had collapsed, the air still sharp with memory. The railing gleamed faintly in the candlelight. and there, snagged upon an iron twist, a delicate shred of fabric fluttered like a ghost's whisper. She plucked it free, lace, fine, pale, and torn, not from the furnishings, but from costume trim. Returning to the ballroom, she scanned the company. Only one guest wore that exact lace, a young debutante named Beatrice Linton, her gown a confection of ivory and blush, trimmed with identical frills. Tuppence approached softly. "My dear, may I admire your gown?" She touched the hem gently, then held out the fragment. Alas, it seems a piece has gone astray. Beatrice's eyes widened, her breath catching. The lace in Tuppence's hand matched perfectly where a corner of her sleeve was frayed. Marston strode forward at once. "So, you were near the balcony at the fatal moment?" The girl stammered, colour flooding her cheeks. I only... Yes, I was there, but please, you must believe me. I did not kill him." Her words tumbled out in panicked sobs. "I went onto the balcony for air. The dancing, the heat, it was overwhelming. I leaned on the railing and the lace must have torn. I saw..." Her voice broke. "I saw what happened." The room fell still. "Go on," Marston pressed. Beatrice's hands shook as she twisted them together. The tray had just been set down. The secretary carried the glass, yes, but before Sir Reginald lifted it, someone's hand slipped forward. Quick, sly, under cover of the shadows and the dance. Something tipped into the goblet. Then he drank. "Whose hand?" Marston barked. I could not see clearly," Beatrice wailed. "The masks, the feathers, it was all confusion, but it was not Henry's hand. It came from another direction. I swear it." The secretary gave a strangled gasp of relief, though suspicion did not fully lift from him. Beatrice wept openly now, her youthful composure shattered. "I was afraid to speak, afraid they would say it was me. But I swear, I saw the act. Someone poisoned him then and there." The ballroom murmured, tension spiking anew. Tuppence knelt beside the girl, her voice soothing. "You were brave to tell us. But think, was there any mark, any jewel, any clue at all to the hand you saw?" Beatrice pressed her hands to her eyes. "Only the bracelet, a glint of diamonds, the clasp caught the light." The company stirred sharply, all eyes turned almost as one toward Lady Eleanor Drake. Her bracelet, still mended poorly, glittered on her wrist. Eleanor's face remained marble, though her eyes chilled. "This is absurd," she said coldly. "A hysterical girl mistakes shadows for truth. I was beside my husband, yes, but I placed nothing in his glass. Do you think me so reckless as to poison him before 100 eyes?" "Sometimes the boldest act is the safest," Tuppence said softly. Eleanor's gaze flashed. "Do not preach to me, Mrs. Beresford. My grief needs no tutor." But the damage was done. The lace had torn more than a sleeve. It had torn a hole in Eleanor's composure. The room fractured once more. Some guests whispered that Beatrice's story proved Eleanor's guilt. Others murmured that a frightened girl was easily mistaken. Marston stalked about, demanding clearer testimony, but none came. Tommy drew Tuppence aside. "We've a picture now. Jealousy, debts, blackmail, inheritance, and at the centre, our widow, poised as marble, yet with cracks showing." "Yes," Tuppence agreed, "but let us not leap too soon." "Tuppence!" Beresford knew the subtler arts of inquiry. She drifted among the ladies like a fellow sufferer in the long night, her feathered mask tilted just so, her tone light as champagne, though her eyes missed nothing. "Oh, how ghastly to have tragedy intrude on such an evening," sighed Mrs. Chillingham, a stout matron swathed in emerald taffeta. She pressed a lace handkerchief to rouged cheeks already flushed with agitation. "Why, I had spoken to Sir Reginald not an hour before. He seemed quite hearty. To think, poison of all things, the very idea sets one's heart fluttering." "Quite dreadful," Tuppence agreed, lowering her voice in a confidential murmur. "Though I did hear whispers he had been threatening certain people. Something about business. Fraud, perhaps. You know how these rumours fly." Mrs. Chillingham's eyes brightened. She leaned closer. "Indeed, my dear, indeed. Sir Reginald was no angel. There are those who say he meant to reveal a scheme most shocking. Figures fiddled, accounts tampered, very serious. Why, if he had spoken publicly, fortunes would have toppled like ninepins." "And whose fortunes do you suppose?" Tuppence asked gently. The matron dabbed her nose. I could not possibly say, but there are 3 here tonight with reason enough to wish him silenced. Tuppence tucked the nugget away. 3 names, 3 motives. The masquerade was beginning to reveal its second mask. She let her drift continue. Near the hearth she found Mrs. Denham, tall and angular, her silk gown rustling like dry leaves. The woman's voice was low, urgent. They'll drag us all through the mud, Mrs. Denham muttered. Mark me, the scandal will spread by morning. And for what? A man who delighted in others' misery. You speak as though you disliked him, Tuppence noted. Disliked? The woman's mouth twisted. He held mortgages over half the county. My husband's among them. Sir Reginald meant to foreclose unless terms were met. Fraudulent scheme indeed. He was at the centre of more than one. Tuppence nodded sympathetically. The pieces shifted. Debts, blackmail, ruined livelihoods. Enough seeds of hatred to grow a forest of motives. Meanwhile, Tommy worked a different path. He slipped into the adjoining anteroom off the ballroom, still under watch, then along the inner corridor, tracing steps on the marble floors where candlelight trembled. The house smelled of beeswax and lilies, but beneath it lay another scent. Secrecy. He pushed open the door of the library, its shelves towering darkly. The room was empty, almost. On a leather armchair, half hidden beneath a discarded cloak, lay a mask. Silver, gleaming, blank as moonlight. The silent stranger, Tommy murmured. He lifted it by the ribbon. Cold, impersonal, and curiously heavy, as though weighted with intent. This had been worn by the figure Tuppence had noticed before the scream, the guest who had vanished like smoke. Yet here was only the mask. Where was the wearer? Tommy searched further, noting a faint scuff of mud upon the Persian rug, a heel mark not yet brushed away. The window latch was unfastened. He leaned out into the fog-swathed garden but saw only darkness. Closing the casement, he pocketed the mask and returned toward the ballroom, thoughts troubled. A guest who slinks away at the moment of death and abandons disguise. What part had they played in Sir Reginald's final moments? Back in the ballroom, the atmosphere had thickened. Lady Aurelia sat rigid upon a chaise, her hands clasped as though in prayer, but her eyes darting nervously from face to face. Inspector Marston questioned servants now, his tone clipped, unforgiving. The butler, a tall man with mournful features, stood stiffly before him. I did not mean to eavesdrop, sir, but one hears things when one serves. Speak plainly, Marston ordered. The butler swallowed. Before the music began, I passed near the side gallery. Sir Reginald stood there in heated words with a lady. She wore a veil, so I could not see her face, but the voices were sharp, threats perhaps or accusations. He said, "If you do not yield, all shall be exposed." She replied, very bitterly, that he would regret his arrogance before the night was through. A collective murmur swept the guests. Marston's eyes narrowed. "And you tell me this only now?" "I feared to intrude, sir, and since the tragedy, I thought it might matter." "It does matter," Marston snapped. "A veiled woman, quarrelling, promising revenge. Which of you was it?" No one spoke. Fans fluttered, silk shifted, but silence reigned. Tuppence, watching closely, marked subtle signs, Lady Eleanor's ivory fingers tightening on her pearls, Mrs. Denham's eyes flicking away, the younger debutante colouring beneath her lace mask. Secrets, all. Tommy re-entered then, silver mask in hand. He held it aloft. "Inspector, I believe this belongs to our vanished guest." All eyes fixed on the gleaming object. Marston frowned. "Where found?" "In the library. Abandoned. And the window open." Marston's lips thinned. "So our stranger has fled." He scanned the company. "Does anyone claim knowledge of who wore this?" No reply. The mask gleamed accusingly in the candlelight, an emblem of absence. Tuppence moved nearer, lowering her voice. "Someone here knows, Inspector. They are too careful not to." Marston shot her a glance, half irritation, half reluctant respect. The guests shifted in their seats, tension mounting. Somewhere among silk and velvet, among jewels and whispers, lay the truth. Sir Reginald had threatened exposure. He had quarrelled with a veiled woman. He had lifted a goblet tainted with poison. and the silver-clad stranger had vanished into fog. Tuppence folded her hands serenely, her mind alive with connections, rivalries, jealousies, debts and schemes, all wrapped in silken civility. The masquerade had begun with laughter, but now every glance concealed calculation. The night stretched onward, oppressive and endless, as secrets in silk and velvet pressed close around them all. The hour had crept past 3, though time itself seemed suspended in Lady Aurelia's gilded townhouse. The candles burned lower, their wax rivers pooling on silver sconces, while shadows leaned long against brocade walls. A fatigue born not of sleep but of dread weighed upon the assembled guests. Yet through it all, Lady Eleanor Drake sat with a composure that was almost regal, her ivory gown uncreased, her hands folded lightly in her lap, as though grief could be carried like a well-practiced accessory. Tuppence observed her from across the room, noting the precision of every gesture. When Eleanor lifted her lace handkerchief to dab her eyes, the tears gleamed too perfectly, falling at precisely the right moments, as if rehearsed. Her voice, when she murmured condolences to the hostess, was steady, clear, devoid of the raggedness one might expect of a woman whose husband had collapsed lifeless only hours before. Almost theatrical, Tuppence whispered to Tommy, who stood at her side. Tommy gave a cautious nod. And the theatre often hides more than it reveals. The inspector, too, was circling closer. Marston fixed Eleanor with his flinty gaze. "Madam, you were by your husband when he drank?" "I was," she said evenly. Her pearls shone pale against her throat. "I had no idea that sip would be his last." "And your marriage?" Marston pressed. Her lips curved faintly, almost too faintly. "Harmonious, a true partnership. We dined together, travelled together. My husband was generous, admired. His passing is an unbearable tragedy." Too polished, thought Tuppence. Words shaped like crystal goblets, beautiful but fragile in their very perfection. She let her gaze wander lower, to the widow's wrist. There a diamond bracelet clasped her arm, but not quite securely. One end dangled where a fastening had snapped. Tuppence's sharp eye caught the tiny scratch upon the metal, as if it had been tugged violently, broken during a struggle. "Tommy," she murmured, inclining her head subtly. "Notice her bracelet, not intact. That clasp did not give way to chance." Tommy frowned. "Could be coincidence." "Coincidences rarely attach themselves to murder," she returned softly. But suspicion alone was never proof. Tuppence knew the value of patience. Later, while Inspector Marston pressed his questioning elsewhere, Tommy and Tuppence slipped from the oppressive ballroom into the quieter passages beyond. The house seemed to hold its breath. Carpeted corridors muffled their steps. Portraits of stern ancestors frowned from gilt frames. At last they reached Sir Reginald's study, a chamber lined with walnut shelves and scented faintly of tobacco. Tommy turned the brass knob. It yielded. Inside, the lamplight was dim, casting heavy shadows across a wide mahogany desk, strewn with correspondence. Papers were neatly stacked, yet one drawer refused to open when Tommy tugged. "Locked," he said. "Which makes it interesting," Tuppence replied. She scanned the desk. A small key lay hidden beneath a blotter, as though hastily tucked away. She plucked it free and fitted it into the drawer. With a faint click, it opened. Inside lay a bundle of letters, their envelopes creased, their handwriting sharp. None bore signatures. Each, however, thrummed with menace. "You will not ruin me. Stay silent, or you shall regret it. If you expose the scheme, you will pay dearly." Tuppence drew a sharp breath. Threats, and from someone who knew he intended disclosure. Tommy leafed through them grimly. But unsigned. No handwriting to identify. "Whoever penned these is among the company tonight, I'd wager." "Indeed," she said. "The question is, was it a betrayed business partner, a discarded lover, or Eleanor herself, cloaking venom in civility?" Tommy slipped the bundle back, closing the drawer softly. Best not parade this before Marston yet. He might trample over subtlety. They left the study, rejoining the murmuring company. Lady Eleanor remained poised in her chair, a figure of sculpted sorrow. Yet when her eyes met Tuppence's across the room, the widow's gaze sharpened for the briefest instant. A flicker, hard and cold, before the veil of composure dropped once more. Tuppence felt the chill of it like a draught through the gilded room. Later still, as coffee was served in porcelain cups scarcely touched, Tuppence drifted near Eleanor, her tone light, conversational. "Lady Drake, how admirably you bear yourself in such trying circumstances. Truly, a testament to strength of character." Eleanor inclined her head. "One must. Hysteria serves no one." "Quite," Tuppence said smoothly. "Though I wonder, did Sir Reginald confide in you about his business affairs? Husbands often do, whether one wishes them to or not." Eleanor's smile was thin. "My husband conducted his matters independently. I was spared such tedium." A blessing, no doubt. And yet, Tuppence allowed her gaze to drop deliberately. "How unfortunate that your bracelet has suffered tonight. The clasp appears damaged." For a heartbeat, Eleanor's hand froze. Then, with exquisite calm, she covered the bracelet with her other hand. "Ah, yes. A small accident earlier. One grows careless with trinkets." Tuppence's smile never wavered, though her mind raced. An accident, was it? Or the trace of resistance when a poisoned goblet was pressed upon its victim? Across the room, Inspector Marston barked another question at a restless Rawdon. The atmosphere thickened again. Whispers, suspicions, unspoken accusations. Yet through it all, Eleanor held her veil of composure. Only Tuppence, watching closely, saw the crack within the marble. The Masquerade's finery had begun to look tawdry in the small hours. Cloaks hung limp with fatigue. Masks slipped crooked upon pale faces. Feathers drooped. Jewels winked dully in the guttering candlelight. The brilliance of the evening was curdling into suspicion, and suspicion showed itself in every thread of silk and velvet. Inspector Marston's questioning had slowed to a grinding halt. His blunt method met walls of silence. Guests bristled, braced, or lied outright. It was not brute force that would unravel this mystery. It was detail, and detail was Tuppence Beresford's speciality. She moved through the room with the air of a hostess rather than a detective, her eyes roaming over costumes as if merely admiring their artistry. Yet each glance measured, each fold noted. Near the French doors, Sir Horace Hillingdon, a dignitary gone to seed, sat puffing unhappily into his kerchief. His cloak of burgundy velvet sprawled about him like spilled wine. Tuppence's gaze lingered and sharpened. There, along the hem, dark stains bloomed irregularly. She bent gracefully, fingertips brushing the fabric. "My dear Sir Horace," she said lightly, "you seem to have been most careless. Wine, is it? Quite a mess." He jerked upright, colour flooding his jowls. "Wine? Impossible. I have not touched a drop all evening." "Then how curious," Tuppence murmured, "for the cloak insists otherwise." Gasps pricked the air. Several guests leaned forward, eager for scandal. Sir Horace sputtered. Well, perhaps someone brushed against me. Yes, during the dance. I was jostled, I remember it now." Tuppence's smile was pleasant, her eyes merciless. "Perhaps, though stains do have a way of clinging to their rightful owners." She let the remark hang, then drifted on, leaving him to sweat beneath the weight of speculation. Tommy, meanwhile, approached the puzzle from a soldier's perspective. He stood by the table where the tray had last been seen, picturing movements, reconstructing steps. "Glass, tray, hand," he muttered, tracing the imagined line. "Secretary carries, places before Sir Reginald. But from tray to lips, those few seconds, what happened then?" He called the secretary, Henry Latham, forward. The young man's mask was awry, his hair damp at the temples. "Walk me through it," Tommy ordered gently but firmly, "from the moment the tray entered the room." Henry swallowed. "A footman carried it. Several glasses of claret. Sir Reginald beckoned me, told me to bring one to him. I did so, directly, I swear. He raised it, spoke to Lady Eleanor, and—" his voice cracked. "You saw the rest." "Did anyone intercept you, brush against you?" Henry shook his head desperately. "No one touched me. I carried it straight, I tell you." Tommy regarded him steadily. Nervous, yes, but nerves alone did not make a murderer. From the servants came another thread. A scullery maid, pale with fright, was ushered forward. She curtsied, wringing her hands. "Speak, girl," Marston barked. She stammered. "Only that I saw the silver-masked gentleman, sir. In the kitchen, not long before. before it happened. He stood by the wine bottles as if waiting, then he left, toward the ballroom. The room stirred, the vanished stranger again. "Describe him," Marston demanded. "I cannot, sir. He was cloaked head to toe, the mask full. But tall, I think, broad-shouldered." Marston scowled. So half the men present. Yet Tommy and Tuppence exchanged a glance. The silver figure again, always near, always elusive. A thread not to be lost. Still, suspicion had its favourites, and Henry the secretary bore much of it. His trembling, his proximity, his opportunity, all seemed damning enough for the impatient. Rawdon the industrialist sneered openly. "There's your culprit. A secretary, desperate, perhaps paid off by a rival. Look at him shake." Henry raised a hand in protest. "I swear I had no part." "Convenient denial," Rawdon spat. Inspector Marston narrowed his eyes. "Convenient indeed. You carried the glass. How are we to believe your innocence?" "I can prove it," Henry cried. "After I set the goblet down, Sir Reginald spoke to Lady Eleanor. He ignored me completely. At that moment, Rawdon himself brushed past, near enough to—" "Lies," Rawdon roared, but others murmured, recalling the movement. Doubt shifted like smoke. Tuppence studied Henry carefully. His fear was real, not calculated. The sweat on his brow, the desperate dart of his eyes, no performance but raw panic. She stepped forward. "Inspector, perhaps it is too simple. Poisoners rarely choose the most visible hand to do their work. Henry is guilty of nerves, nothing more. The alibi is stronger than it appears." Marston bristled but said nothing. The room's air thickened, the costumes themselves becoming clues. Tuppence noted frayed threads where feathers had been ripped from a headdress. She saw faint powder on gloves that should have been spotless. She marked mud spatters on boots when no guest had stepped outside since evening began. Every costume told a story, and each story twisted into another. At last Tommy spoke, loud enough to command the restless crowd. "Let us not forget, the poisoned glass must have passed through only a few hands. It was poured, placed, carried, consumed. Somewhere in that chain, death was slipped in, not before, not after. We must measure seconds, not hours." The room grew still. His words made the murder smaller, sharper. Tuppence nodded. "Yes, seconds unaccounted for. That is the space where truth hides." Her gaze drifted to the silver mask that Tommy had found earlier in the library. It gleamed where it lay upon the inspector's table, mute and damning. Whoever had worn it had brushed close to the very heart of the crime. But until that phantom was unmasked, suspicion would continue to cling, like wine stains on velvet. And so the night deepened. The costumes that had once promised romance and revelry now marked guilt and deceit. Cloaks, feathers, jewels, each another page in the story of betrayal. The secretary remained under suspicion, though Tuppence's instincts whispered otherwise. The silver stranger lingered as a shadow, absent yet central. And Sir Reginald's death, poisoned in plain sight, grew more complex with every passing moment. The masquerade had become a stage where truth and lies performed in tandem, their costumes the only script. And in that theatre of shadows, Tommy and Tuppence knew the real play had only just begun. The clock in Lady Aurelia's great hall struck 4, each note echoing like a gavel through the suffocating stillness. Guests stirred restlessly, shifting in their costumes, masks half abandoned, jewels dulled by exhaustion. The air was thick with perfume, candle smoke, and the faint metallic tang of dread. Inspector Marston had been pacing, his boots striking the parquet with the steady beat of frustration. His questions had circled, sharp but fruitless, like a hound running the same trail without quarry. The company, strained but unbroken, seemed ready to splinter under the weight of suspicion. And then, into the silence, a woman's voice rose like a trumpet. "It was I," she declared, standing abruptly from her chair near the hearth. Her gown of sapphire silk shimmered as she lifted her chin, eyes flashing behind her peacock feather mask. "Yes, I confess it. I poisoned Sir Reginald. He deserved it." The room erupted. Fans fluttered, men muttered. One lady gave a cry that cracked into sobs. Inspector Marston spun toward her, his face hardening with the shock of sudden prey. "Confess again, madam, for the benefit of us all," he demanded. "You claim responsibility for this crime?" "I do," she said, her voice vibrating with passion. "Sir Reginald wronged me. He promised me devotion. He swore he would leave his cold marble of a wife. Instead, he cast me aside like a worn glove, humiliated me before all society. I swore he should not do so and live. Tonight I fulfilled that oath." Gasps rippled anew. Lady Eleanor sat frozen, her face an alabaster mask. Rawdon muttered, "The actress. Of course it would be her." For the woman was indeed an actress. Miss Clara Vale, celebrated for tragic heroines upon the London stage. The hand with the bracelet may yet be another's, borrowing her guise. Still, the noose tightens. She glanced toward Eleanor, who sat calm, her veil of dignity drawn close once more, but beneath it, Tuppence sensed the faintest tremor. As the night waned toward morning, the company sagged under exhaustion, yet suspicion burned hotter, each motive exposed, each secret dragged into light. Affairs, debts, blackmail, inheritance, the dance of motives swirled dizzyingly, and in the centre, the torn lace lay upon the table, a fragile clue that whispered of truth. Somewhere among the guests, concealed still beneath poise and lies, the true murderer waited. But Tuppence's instincts told her the waiting would not last much longer. The first faint streaks of dawn bled through the stained-glass windows of Lady Aurelia's townhouse, casting fractured colours across the parquet floor. Pale blue, deep crimson, and dull gold shimmered in uneasy patterns upon the ballroom where the masquerade had long since lost its laughter. The candles burned to stubs, guttered against the growing light, and the air was heavy with smoke, perfume, and the bitterness of sleepless hours. The guests sat or stood in clusters, weary, rumpled, their costumes wilted under the weight of suspicion. The silver mask lay on the inspector's table like an abandoned relic, its gleam cold and accusing. Sir Reginald's body had been removed, but his presence haunted the room as surely as if he still sprawled beneath the chandelier. It was Tommy who spoke first, his voice carrying firm across the hush. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "we cannot sit in silence until exhaustion clouds the truth. The murderer of Sir Reginald Drake is among us, and dawn demands clarity. My wife and I have traced each movement of this night, each mask, each motive. Now the time has come to set them in order." Inspector Marston gave a grunt but folded his arms, conceding the floor. He had bludgeoned and bullied to no avail. Perhaps deduction, not force, would prise the truth open. Tuppence stepped to her husband's side, her feathered mask dangling from her hand. Her eyes were bright, sharp despite the hour. "We ask for patience. It is a puzzle, and every piece must be shown before the picture reveals itself." The company shifted. Rawdon loomed at the back, arms crossed defiantly. Clara Vale clutched a damp handkerchief, her mascara smudged into bruised shadows beneath her eyes. Beatrice Linton, the debutante, sat pale and trembling, her torn lace sleeve hidden beneath her cloak. Lady Eleanor, ivory gown immaculate, bracelet glinting faintly, remained poised in her chair, the perfect widow. Tommy began. First, the poisoned glass. It was carried by Henry Latham, the secretary. He fetched it from the tray at his master's command. Yet Henry did not pour the wine, nor linger long enough to tamper with it. His nerves betrayed him, but guilt did not. He was our first suspect, yet the evidence cleared him. Henry gave a shudder of relief, though his hand still shook. Next, Tommy continued, we must recall the vanished stranger in silver. He was seen in the kitchen near the wine, then fled when suspicion grew. When unmasked, he proved to be Godfrey Drake, Sir Reginald's nephew. His motive? Money withheld, inheritance denied. Strong, yes, but his tale of confrontation was corroborated by timing. He quarrelled, yes, but he did not poison. What damned him most was the letter found in his pocket. Tuppence lifted the envelope. A letter implicating Edmund Rawdon, Sir Reginald's rival. Yet its very obviousness made it false. Why would a guilty man hand his enemy written proof? It was planted, too clumsy, too theatrical. Godfrey sought protection in making another appear guilty, but his fear was genuine. He ran, not from murder, but from suspicion. Godfrey's jaw tightened. "I told you so," he muttered, though no one looked at him kindly. Tuppence paced slowly. her voice steady. Then there was Clara Vale, the actress. Her confession rang loud, but it was a performance. Her motive was humiliation, blackmail. Sir Reginald bled her of money and pride, yet her story faltered at the details. The poison she named was wrong, her account rehearsed. She confessed not to guilt, but to desperation. She wished to turn shame into vengeance, a false confession masking a darker truth. Reginald Drake was a blackmailer as well as financier. Clara hid her face, sobbing softly. Tommy took up the thread. We heard of debts, of threatened exposure, from Mrs. Denham, from Rawdon, from others. Reginald was not loved. He was feared, resented, despised. He held power through papers, letters, accounts. His death relieved many, but suspicion narrowed when one small clue appeared. He held aloft the scrap of lace. This, he said, caught on the balcony rail near where he fell. It matched only one gown, that of Beatrice Linton. The girl gave a strangled sob. I swear I did not. No, Tuppence said gently. You did not poison. You saw. From your place on the balcony you witnessed a hand slip into the shadows, tipping death into a glass. You feared to speak, lest the lace betray you, but you were brave enough to tell us at last. Beatrice nodded miserably. I saw the glint of a bracelet. Diamonds. The clasp caught the light. All eyes turned, inexorable as the tide, toward Lady Eleanor. She did not flinch. This is nonsense, she said coolly. I was beside my husband, yes, but grief has clouded this child's memory. I touched nothing. Tuppence's gaze sharpened. And yet your bracelet is broken, the clasp torn. When did it break, Lady Eleanor? Before or after your husband's death? Eleanor's lips tightened. Earlier, a trifling accident. Or in the moment he resisted, Tuppence said softly. A murmur rippled through the guests. The poised widow sat frozen, the faintest crack showing in her composure. Inspector Marston barked, Speak plain, Mrs. Beresford. Do you accuse the widow? Tommy answered, his voice grave. Step by step, every path returns to her. Henry carried the glass, but Eleanor was near enough to touch it. Godfrey quarrelled, but Eleanor remained at his side. Rawdon raged, but Eleanor alone had opportunity cloaked by intimacy. The bracelet clasp is the final thread, torn not by chance but in struggle. Reginald saw the poison poured, tried to resist, and in that instant her jewel caught and snapped. He drank, and he died. The room exhaled as one, a wave of shock. Lady Eleanor rose slowly, her gown whispering against the floor. She stood tall, her beauty cold as alabaster. You weave a tale most dramatic, she said. But it is only that, a tale. You have no proof beyond lace and conjecture. Tuppence's eyes never wavered. Your proof is in your own performance. Every tear measured, every sigh rehearsed. You mourned with precision, but never with heart. When others quailed, you remained marble. Grief is messy, Lady Eleanor. Yours was too clean. Eleanor's hands trembled ever so slightly. You dare lecture me on grief? I dare, Tuppence said, her voice quiet but unyielding. Because this was not grief. It was theatre. The same theatre Sir Reginald's life had become. He threatened to expose your embezzlements, money siphoned from accounts, debts hidden beneath his name. Had he lived to speak, society would have seen you ruined, so you chose ruin for him instead. The silence that followed was suffocating. The stained glass light painted Eleanor's face in fractured colour, her eyes glinting with fury and despair. At last she laughed, short, bitter, sharp. Very well, she said. You think me guilty. Perhaps I am. He was a cruel man, a tyrant. He thought me his ornament, his obedient wife. Yet I was cleverer. I managed accounts he never dreamed of. I built my freedom beneath his nose, and when he threatened to expose me, her voice dropped to a hiss, I ended the threat. Gasps broke out, scandal and horror mingling. Inspector Marston stepped forward, his hand heavy on her shoulder. Lady Eleanor Drake, you are under arrest for the murder of your husband. For the first time her poise shattered. She wrenched against his grip, her diamonds flashing. Do not touch me. You think you triumph? Fools! He deserved worse than poison. But the struggle was brief. The constables closed in, their grip iron. Her cries echoed through the gilded room, breaking the hush of dawn. When at last she was led away, silence remained. The guests slumped, exhausted, scandalized, relieved. Lady Aurelia sat pale as marble herself, her splendid ball reduced to ruin. Clara Vale wept quietly. Beatrice clung to her mother. Rawdon muttered curses, though whether for Eleanor or for Reginald's ghost was unclear. Tommy exhaled, rubbing his temples. Well, tuppence. Another night's entertainment, though not as the hostess planned. She smiled faintly. A masquerade, after all. Masks hiding faces, masks hiding crimes. But dawn unmasks all. Inspector Marston gave a curt nod. I'll not deny, Beresfords, your observations were keen. The Yard shall see this through. See that it does, Tommy said dryly. The stained-glass windows brightened with morning light. The masquerade was ended, the murderer revealed, the widow unmasked. Yet the echoes of the night lingered, the taste of poison still sharp in memory. For Tommy and tuppence, it was another mystery unravelled, another mask stripped away. And as they left the ballroom at last, stepping into the fog-silvered streets of London, tuppence murmured, "Funny, isn't it? How the most dazzling jewels so often hide the sharpest claws." Tommy offered his arm. Yes, and how dawn, in the end, tells the truth. They walked into the pale morning, leaving behind the broken glitter of a night where shadows had danced, masks had lied, and one woman's ambition had poisoned them all. The ballroom, once a glittering stage of silks and laughter, lay hollow in the cold light of morning. Streaks of pale sunlight bled across the parquet, exposing every wilted garland, every smudge of ash from guttered candles. The chandeliers, still dripping wax, no longer dazzled. They hung heavy, like ornaments in a house of mourning. The guests drifted apart in uneasy silence. Cloaks were drawn about tired shoulders, jewels clasped nervously, and masks, once instruments of mystery and delight, were discarded carelessly on chairs and tables. They looked oddly tragic in the daylight, their painted smiles cracked, their feathers bent, their sequins dulled. Lady Aurelia stood near the entrance, her hands twisting a lace handkerchief, bidding farewell to her guests with the politeness of a hostess who knew her reputation had crumbled. Clara Vale, the actress, slipped out quietly, her face pale beneath rouge. Rawdon muttered curses at the world as he demanded his carriage. Young Beatrice clung to her mother, her torn gown hidden beneath a cloak. Godfrey Drake slunk away under escort, his defiance diminished to weary silence. At the centre of it all, Inspector Marston conferred with his constables. Lady Eleanor Drake, her poise shattered, had been taken away. The scandal would ripple through London for weeks, perhaps months, but for now the masquerade was finished. Tuppence, standing by the tall windows, gazed at the abandoned masks scattered like fallen soldiers. She spoke softly to Tommy at her side. Strange, isn't it? How easily glamour hides the ugliest truths. Lace, jewels, laughter, all it takes to disguise betrayal. Tommy gave a dry smile. I dare say Reginald's guests will think twice before accepting another midnight invitation. Poison rather spoils the dance. She glanced at him, amusement flickering in her tired eyes. You never liked dancing anyway. True, he replied, but sleuthing is another matter, especially when it ends in breakfast. Inspector Marston strode over, his boots clicking sharply. His expression remained stern, yet there was a grudging respect in his eyes. You Beresfords have a knack, he said. Wouldn't call it orthodox, mind you, but your deductions were vital. Without that lace and bracelet, the widow might have walked free. Tommy inclined his head. Glad to be of service, Inspector. We've a taste for puzzles, that's all. Marston harumphed. Well, keep your taste sharp. London seems to have an endless supply of them. With that, he turned back to his men, barking orders to tidy the last remnants of the Yard's presence. By the time the Beresfords stepped out into the street, the fog had begun to lift. The sun struggled through, pale and watery, gilding the rooftops and chimneys. The city stirred awake. Milk carts rattled over cobbles, paperboys shouted headlines, and the aroma of fresh bread floated from distant shops. They walked arm in arm, leaving behind the echo of chandeliers and whispered scandals, their steps brisk despite the long night. Coffee, Tuppence announced. Strong coffee, and toast, preferably without arsenic. Or cyanide, Tommy added. We've had quite enough of that for one evening. They found a small cafe tucked along a quiet square. Its windows steamed with warmth, and the smell of fried bacon and fresh coffee was irresistible. They slipped into a booth near the window, grateful for the ordinary bustle around them. The waiter brought them coffee in thick white cups, buttered toast, and a pair of eggs fried to golden perfection. For the first time in hours, they ate without urgency, though the conversation was never far from the night's events. Tuppence stirred sugar into her cup, her gaze thoughtful. You know, Eleanor Drake almost played the perfect role. Grief polished like crystal, poise fit for marble. But even the best actress forgets her lines eventually. Tommy bit into his toast. True enough. It was the bracelet that betrayed her. Small things always do. Lace, clasps, crumbs. They shout louder than speeches when you look close. She smiled faintly. Do you ever think, Tommy, that people will never change? Motives remain the same, no matter the costumes. Money, love, pride, fear, they just wear different masks. Timeless, my dear Tuppence. As timeless as your instincts. Flattery will get you a second cup of coffee, she teased. They shared a quiet laugh, the weariness of the night easing into the comfort of familiarity. Outside, the square filled with morning life. A cart rumbled past, a dog barked, and children skipped along the pavement with satchels. The world, oblivious to poison and masquerades, went on. Tommy folded his napkin and leaned back, satisfaction in his eyes. So, another mystery tucked neatly away. Shall we swear off midnight balls in the future? Tuppence arched a brow. Not at all. Where else would we find such excellent practice? Besides, masks may fall, but mysteries never rest. And I do like a good riddle, he chuckled. Then I fear, Mrs. Beresford, that breakfast will often be followed by adventure. She raised her cup in salute. To breakfast, and to the next adventure. Their cups clinked softly, the sound mingling with the morning bustle as sunlight finally spilled warm across the square. And so the masquerade was over. The shadows lifted, the poisoner revealed, the masks cast aside. But for Tommy and Tuppence the night's lesson lingered. Beneath velvet and jewels, behind laughter and charm, human motives beat on, timeless, familiar, and endlessly dangerous. Somewhere in another grand hall or quiet lane, another secret waited, and when it called, the Beresfords would be ready.